Where my dykes at? Where my dykes at? Come on, louder, louder. Yeah, where my dykes at? No, just kidding. I love you all so much. Thank you all. We are celebrating, I believe, our 4th program with this exhibit, right? 5th. This is our 5th program with this exhibit in collaboration with EastSide Arts Alliance. Let's give it up, y'all. It's powerful. So again, my name is Dr. Kerby Lynch, and I'm a part of the Bay Area Lesbian Archives, serving as the interim executive director. And this is just a beautiful sight to see. Look at this house, y'all. It's full, wall to wall with it. People caring about intergenerational lesbian conversations. Let's give it up for y'all. Give it up, give it up. So again, we have been in partnership with the EastSide Arts Alliance since September. Well, really, for the past year. We've been in this collaboration with this amazing organization, the epicenter of revolutionary radical thought in the Bay Area. The epicenter, we in Oakland. But particularly EastSide Arts Alliance took a stand, they took a chance to collaborate with the Bay Area Lesbian Archive to help us celebrate 10 years. It's our 10-year anniversary this year. All right. We know that this has been a labor of love, a labor of sorrow. This organization was founded in 2014 by the illustrious, the myth, the legend, Lenn Keller. And this was an organization she founded to, again, provide knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to lesbians, right? To let people know that we come from a very sacred culture, that we come from a lineage of women who looked evil in the face and said, my body, my choice, right? Who looked master in the face and said, no more. And the whole point of this exhibit is, again, to highlight and to honor third world lesbian consciousness. All right? Why this is important to highlight third world lesbian consciousness is because this is something that Lenn Keller was particularly motivated by to create this archive, so that there's a full diversity in the retelling of the liberation movement of gender diverse and sexually free loving people, right? That a lot of times in the dominant narrative about LGBT liberation, you don't see our people represented. And so she wanted to expand what was considered to be a lesbian activist. She wanted to expand what we understood to be a part of history. And she wanted everybody to know that it was the everyday lesbian that contributed to our liberation and our freedom. The sister you see on the street that you don't really know her name, but you see her working and struggling, right? So we're really rooted in those principles. And this whole exhibit, Sister Hold On, right? Reclaiming Third World Lesbian Imaginaries is an invitation for you all to figure out what resonates with you on these walls, figure out what resonates with you in this panel, and embody it, and take this revolution to the next level, okay? This is the return of the repressed. This is the return of, I know, this is the return, y'all, right? You know, this is spirit-driven, ancestor-driven, and this is a very powerful space that we all get to gather in today. I mean, again, look at this room. I already can feel that we can all conspire together to really change this society. So again, we have some really dynamic, fiery panelists. So I'm gonna invite y'all to the stage to take a seat. Let's give it up for our panelists, y'all. And we just have an overall treat for you. We just got an overall treat for you all. Okay. So again, I know. So again, this is an intergenerational panel, right? So we got some OGs on the panel. Shout out to the OGs out there. Who's an OG in the audience? Okay. And then we got some young Gs on the panel, all right? So it's an OG, young G conversation. And why this is important, again, is the Bay Area Lesbian Archive at the core and at the foundation is an intergenerational organization, right? I met Lenn Keller when I was 21 years old, and she became my mentor, and she took me under her wing, and she taught me the game, right? That's why I love black women. That's why I particularly love black lesbians. She taught me about black lesbian consciousness, right? Knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of who I am as a young black woman in this country is what she wanted to pour into me, and so I wouldn't be so nervous, wouldn't be so anxious, and really have a clear direction on where I'm going, right? And that's the power of our third world lesbian culture. And this panel is really about exploring how that term has evolved, how this movement has evolved, and how we can preserve it, remix it, and have it just reemerge today, all right? So we're gonna get into some heavy conversation. Heavy. Is the light too bright? Yes. Roberto, that light way too bright. Yeah, soft light.
Wrong one.
Okay. I feel it too. I'm getting hot up here, you know. So hot in her. No, I was kidding. Dope. So basically, this is a good conversation, but it's a two-way dialogue, all right? Audience, our organization operates, again, with y'all giving us feedback, with y'all sharing your experience, pushing back, affirming, etc. So I got a few questions to get us started. However, I want y'all to raise your hands if you have a question, a comment, or concern, or something you want to contribute to the conversation, because we're making meaning in this room and we're making memory together, right? So again, unfortunately, Lenn Keller passed away in 2020, all right? So rest in peace, rest in power, and rest in perfection. However, what that meant was there wasn't a lot of time for transition for me to get really what the plan was, really what the download is. And that's what's at stake with this work. That's why we have to be an intergenerational organization, intergenerational movement. We losing people every single day. But what Lenn Keller used to tell me, she said every single day a new lesbian is born, right? So we have an obligation and a duty to pour into the next generation of lesbians in the world, however they may look, however they may sound, however may they come with their politics.
Okay. They're working it out.
Okay, mood lighting.
Working it out.
It's serious business what we do here, though, right? So, again, just appreciate you all for coming out. All right, y'all ready to get this started? Yeah. All right, again, we still got pizza. Don't be scared. I know y'all hungry. We got pizza, wine, Dr. Pepper, no sugar. You know, we trying to have a good time tonight, so I love y'all. Peace. So first things first, for the crowd who don't know, I'm gonna let y'all, can y'all introduce yourselves, self-define yourselves? All right, so let's open up the panel with your name, what your organizational affiliation is, and then again, kind of like an intro question. Let me say it right. This is a very intellectual panel, y'all. Gotta make sure they get it. So again, who you are, your organizational affiliation, and then what about third world lesbian activism influences how you respond to structural oppression? Yes. It's heavy, right? All right, check this out. Your name, your organizational affiliation, and what about third world lesbian activism influences how you respond to structural oppression? Okay. We getting heavy. First question. All right. Introduce yourself, though, let the audience know who you be. Oh, you brave? You first?
Yeah. Maybe I'm the brave one for today. Hi, my name's Nneka Okeke, and I'm one of the regional leads for the Black LGBT Migrant Project. And in terms of responding to that question, I feel like, I guess the influence of like third world lesbian activism and how it helps me respond to societal oppression is not only by it affirming my humanity, but also it leads to me like thinking out like what I center and what I don't center. Like I've made a conscious choice to decenter white people and men from my life, and that, thank you, because it really does make my heart sing. And the reason why I chose to do that was because not only were those two sides of my like multifaceted oppression, but also more importantly, it was making me wonder if I was fully a human being. So when I consciously made that choice, or rather it's been like a stepping stone to make that choice, but when I consciously made that choice, I made it with my humanity being the forefront. And I think that's a pretty key takeaway from lesbian activism.
Hi everyone, my name's Alecia. I suppose my organizational affiliation is Berkeley Cop Watch, so shout out Berkeley Cop Watch, kind of random, but you know, watch those cops. And I think that I've come to understand queerness and also transness, queerness as something that you are, but primarily something that you do, as something that's like active and requires agency and action. And I think that a lot of like activism amongst people my age is more so virtue signaling or like talking into the void rather than action and activity and making affect onto the world. So I see the parallel between queerness being something you do and change being something that you have to actively get up and make every day.
Yeah. I'm Paola Bacchetta, and I am going to be speaking mainly from, I mean, I've been an activist all my life, and I'm from like the older generation here. The first group that I belonged to was Dyke Tactics. It was in Philadelphia, and our group from the very beginning had, you know, an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, anti-racism, anti-capitalist position, and we wrote a lot. We wrote a ton of things, actually more than I even remembered, but when I was doing our archive, because I got voted to be the archivist. And, you know, we just have a ton of stuff. A lot of it is still in my living room. It's going to go to Yale University. But, you know, in our day, I think really we already had a lot of politics happening that were, you know, a lesbian take on imperialism, a lesbian take on colonialism, and where we would bring out the gender and sexuality aspects of things, and in our analysis. And then you know, when we were a part of committees of support, it was always, you know, we had our take on things. And so, anyway, I will leave it there because, you know, we'll be discussing that later. But I just want to say that I have never stopped being an activist, and today I'm co-coordinator of Decolonizing Sexualities Network, which is a transnational thing with a lot of dykes in it.
Ashe. Good evening, everyone. You want us to use the other one? Yeah, use this one. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Remember this voice, because I'm going to be doing some work on KPFA in March. Lisa Detmer. Anyway, I'm Dr. Angela Wellman, and I fully embrace this doctor piece because I was at that dissertation for a very long time, and I'm just real proud of myself that I managed to get that shit done. It was no easy task. But I think much of, you know, what gave me that were my, like, kind of as I reflect on this, my very early days growing up in Kansas City, Missouri. As a lesbian, I later learned that that's what I was. It wasn't something I thought about. It was just the way I moved in the world, and was just really being honest with myself until people started pushing back and calling me names, old bulldagger, and this and that and the other, you know? This was in the 70s, the late 70s, when I then encountered, you know, all of the early black feminist writers, you know, particularly Bell Hooks really, like, kind of turned me around, because Bell was constantly trying to find a language to describe what this is we're living in. So what she come up with? White supremacist, patriarchy, capitalists, or something like that. Boom, that's it right there. Then and always will be forevermore. That is what it is. We don't need anything else, because it just lays it all out. It also helped me understand, though, my own intersectionality inside of that, which was not even a conversation we were having at that time, intersectionality. But she kind of brought that together and helped me to always think about my own truth inside of this society that I live in, right? So the early teachings of our early black feminist writers really helped lay out the way that I approached my life, or even understood how I was approaching it. Made me courageous and to trust and believe in what I think is necessary and relevant to particularly, I live in a life where I want to see Black people's lives, I want to see Black people flourishing in this afterlife of slavery. And so I consider the work that I do wake work. And my institutional affiliation then is a place I created 20 years ago called the Oakland Public Conservatory of Music. Thank you, clap. Because I was doing that while writing this dissertation. But it centers, the Black experience, the African American experience in the afterlife of slavery, in the development of American musical culture and identity. That without that, we would not have soul or funk or rap or R&B or blues or jazz or the banjo. And these conversations are important, and I think to bring us back around to our question about Third World Lesbian feminism, that is what kind of gave me my grounding to really stay focused on what I can call, for me, an absolute truth, to help me stay focused on what I believe in. And I'm grateful to Bell and the others for kind of laying the groundwork for us to create like a touchstone, lest we forget, right? We can just always return to the archive and be reminded.
That's a good one. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Shah Noor. My pronouns are they, them. We're supposed to introduce ourselves. So I will say I am a child of the diaspora. I'm a third world child of Sudan. My institutional affiliation is the people of Sudan and all of y'all. I would say that is where my third world activism builds from. To name some people, I think Bell Hooks is a great person. June Jordan's a legacy also for me. And the women of Sudan, my grandmothers, my Haboba Sakina and my Haboba Sit Noor, and all the women of Sudan who fight for freedom, not only now in the present moment in this counter-revolutionary war, but for decades and centuries. And before I continue answering the question, I would just like to give a little moment of silence for all of our martyrs in Sudan, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Haiti, in Congo, who continue, and all those who continue to fight for freedom, the martyrs and the freedom fighters. And so how has third world lesbian activism shaped and influenced my approach to structural oppression? I will think about, and I think I will talk about queer identity and lesbianism and homosocial relationships on this panel for me from a non-romantic perspective, like what that really does in community, in friendship, in our networks of care, because that's just where it shows up for me. I know what Dr. Wellman feels in the dissertating phase, because I am currently dissertating. So that is where I'm at. And I'm also a writer and an editor and a poet and an artist here in Oakland on unceded Ohlone territory. And I think that answers question one.
Let's give it up for our panel, y'all. All right. So, getting into the real question from my OGs, and then eventually young Gs. Okay, let me read it. Let me be direct. Dr. Wellman. All right. So, the Bay Area Lesbian Archives was founded to preserve a history that has often been deliberately repressed and erased due to its powerful liberatory impact. Can we agree to that? Again, I'm going to read that again. The Bay Area Lesbian Archives was founded to preserve a history that has often been deliberately repressed and erased due to its powerful liberatory impact. Can you all just set the scene for those who wasn't there, who didn't know? What made third world lesbian activism what it was back in the day? I mean, we're talking about resistance to state violence, fascism, Reagan. Can you just walk us through how back then is a parallel to what's going on today? And is there anything from back then, the historical foundations of how y'all were resisting those systems back then can empower the next generation today? Set the scene, set the scene. What was we missing?
I mainly want to just kind of talk about some of what you and I were talking about earlier, like this need for space and place, you know, because when it's like the need to gather, you know, I think of what, Harriet Gibbs, that's some research I'm doing. Harriet, thank you very much. And the retreats, the retreat, what's it called? Loopholes of retreat. And the importance for those spaces, in which we had a lot of them back in the day, places that we could go and come together and have a conversation, places we could go to. From these conversations, we could develop responses and reactions through, like, for example, our artistry. I'm a musician, and so you know, as Nina Simone reminds us, the role of the artist, right, is to speak back and keep it real and keep the issues of the day on the minds of the people. And I think that a big part of my experience moving to the Bay in the mid-'80s was the opportunity to be in spaces over there on Valencia Street where, you know, we gathered a lot. Those were our loopholes of retreat. And in order to even begin to address what's happening, what's going down, we need to be able to have spaces where we can congregate so that we can agitate, you know, and levitate the spirits and such, right? I guess I just want to start with that, like the importance of having place and space that's safe, right? And we had those spaces. Valencia Street was like heaven. I loved it. You know, I lived, when I first moved to the Bay, I lived right in what used to be called the Western Addition. But, you know, gentrification has done what they do, but it's always going to be the Western Addition to me. But, you know, we would walk down, and Valencia Street was like our haven. I would just remember, once I would get to like 16th and Valencia, I would exhale. There was a space, so from 16th all the way up to 24th Street, we had cafes, we had bars, we were just there, you know, in the same way that we see the newcomers, the young techies, and whatever they've done to the street. It was not in any way like that, as you probably know. But I just want to say, I think that those establishing these loopholes of retreat, that we can call them, spaces where we can go and be and do what Fred Moten calls, like, learn and what does he say it, like, where we can plot and plan, you know, how to respond to what's going on.
Yes. Yes to all that. You know, I forgot to say that I'm also a doctor. I'm Dr. Bacchetta. Yeah. And I'm a professor at UC Berkeley, and in gender and women's studies, and in the LGBT minor. So, and you know, I'm really proud to be here with Kerby, who I first met there in a course on archiving, on queer archiving that I gave, and when Kerby was an undergrad. So,
Which is how I met Lenn Keller, doing your
yes.
assignment.
That's right. Yes. So we came first full circle, I think, with Kerby, and I'm so proud of everything that y'all are doing over at the archives. It's so important. It's super important work. And it, you know, it just is really energizing to see the work that y'all are doing. It's amazing. I think about space, you know, one of the things, we had space in Philadelphia too, where Dyke Tactics was, and we also created home space, like we lived collectively into collective houses, and we, you know, we had a bookstore that we created that of course fell apart for financial reasons, but while it lasted, it was great, and we all worked there. It was like a co-op kind of working situation. And yeah, there was just a lot of space in different there were bars. We didn't really, our collective was really very, very political, so we only went there to hand out flyers, you know. We never went for a drink or anything. We really went to hand out flyers. So I hardly knew them. I knew where they were and the names of them, but I didn't know much about them actually. So, but I think that the space was really important, and that it was like from the space, things gelled. You know, you get a bunch of dykes together in a space, and especially a bunch of dykes of color together in a space, and it just gelled. You know, we would talk about everything from morning till night, and we created our homes as like space where it was lesbian space. And I remember once the person, a man came to read the meter, and we were like, "You are not coming in," because you know we had send us a woman. Or send us a dyke, which they were not going to do, but I mean, it was like that back at that time. And we were just, you know, really just very assertive as lesbians. I mean, and today, we were just talking about this before, that the term lesbian almost has disappeared. And we were just incredibly like assertive as dykes. And, you know, it had to be in the name. And I also wanted to mention that, you know, our collective was very vocal. Like, we were not like the quiet lesbians who sit around, or, you know, we were out in the public space a lot, and so we were targeted a lot. And we ended up being beaten up by the police in 1975 on December 4th. And we took the police to court for police brutality. We ended up in the hospital. And 6 of us took the police to court for police brutality. And it's actually the first time that any LGBTIQ or plus 2S++ took police to court for brutality against LGBTIQ 2S++ folk. And we have been, unfortunately, you know, it's like, I think it's really significant that the first to do that were a bunch of dykes. So, and I mean, really, I think there are so many things that we need to uncover, which again is why I'm just so happy about BALA and this project. So that's all.
Okay. Yeah, those mics are for you three. Okay, thank you, OGs. Any OGs in the audience want to answer this question about what it was like? What happened back then that you think should come back today? It's okay if not, but want to give y'all some space. All right.
Come on now.
Okay. Later.
You don't want to hear about what it was like back then?
I do.
You know what? I read your question again, because I want to respond to something. Please.
Got you. So how do you think the legacies of third world lesbian activism, again considering its resistance to state violence, fascism, and heteronormativity, shape today's social movements? How can these historical foundations empower the activism in this current era?
So I want to say that it's the same as it ever was. All those things that you just, you know, it's not so much about what's happened. What'd you say? Read that other part again. My mind's not good. Fascism, what else?
State violence.
State violence. Anybody know about that today? Okay, what else?
Fascism.
Okay, all those things, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I really just want to underscore that, you know, like after we're dealing with what we just, you know, what just happened in the elections and such, the glasses, gravity. The ancestors like, okay, I say, come on. I was talking to some elders at the barbershop. You really want to go get down in and go to a black barbershop last weekend, and he was like, I'm not even tripping on that. And then he started laying down for us things that we know, but there was a way that he said it, the reminder was just so like, it took my breath away when he started talking about the egregious brutalities that, you know, enslaved African people had to endure every day. And but the way he laid it out was like, and then he was like, so I don't know what the fuck y'all are tripping about, you know, when he was talking about, like, you know, the fact that that dude won again. You know, that's, we have so much more to remember and think about, and how our ancestors, what they had to endure. It was just the way that he said that. But so there's nothing new about then as opposed to now when it comes to structural, you know, challenges that we're having to deal with. And I just want to underscore the impact of development and gentrification that has disenabled us to be able to gather and have our spaces, to even, you know, it's like now folks are living together in homes together like that, but they also work 2 and 3 jobs trying to like just make that their portion of the rent. So there's not even really time to stop and think about these types of other structural challenges that we have. So the importance, again, of having spaces where we can gather, on the airwaves, for example. you know, there we go, Lisa Detmer over there with the, you know, what's the name of your show, Lisa? Yes, Women's Magazine. You know, those are KPFA. Those are spaces where we can go and connect, right? And I just think that that's just really one of our deepest challenges right now is having those types of again, loopholes of retreat where we can plot and plan our freedom.
I like that, loopholes of retreat. That's poetic. And
Well, I mean, you know, it's not my, you know,
Yeah, it was
Harriet
Harriet.
Gibbs.
Yeah.
I keep saying Gibbs.
but it's deep though.
I'm researching a person named Harriet Gibbs who's the first African American woman to create a conservatory of music for black people, and this conservatory was founded in 1905. And when she had to go off and, you know, do some traveling so she could raise money, she was a pianist, she hired this woman who I later found out was a lesbian back in like 15 or something like that, and who lived on the other side of town with her partner. She was also a professor at Howard University in English. There's more to say about that, but you'll see it when I finish my book. You know, when the book
Shout
come
out
out.
for the book, y'all. Okay, doctor. Okay.
So anyway, any chance that you get a chance to like create space for lesbians, capital L, big fat, bold L, to where we can come and create and get together and talk and plan and plot. We need those spaces, and not necessarily in somebody's. And I ain't mad about that. I'm an academic too. I'm not in the hollowed halls, but we need spaces, not just in classrooms, where we can come together and address the things that we are dealing with. You know.
Let's give it up, y'all. Okay. So this question goes to my young G's, okay? Intergenerational. Young G's, hearing this, right? Inheriting this, right? Speaking to this, trying to create a continuum of the consciousness, right? Because it's generation, we different generations, right? Frantz Fanon, right? That famous quote, every generation has a duty. You know, you either fulfill it or betray it. So for y'all, right, inheriting these legacies, right, something that Dr. Angela was referring to about lesbian politics, right? And we had a group of Stanford students here who were touring the exhibit. I told them, you know, think expansively about lesbian. It's not just about, you know, the lesbian part, but it's about the consciousness. It's about it's not just about the sexuality, you know. It's about the politics of survival, the politics of resistance, and most importantly, it's about self-possession, right? And having the ability to have possession of oneself in a context where you got the carceral system, imperialism, displacement, borderlands, right? The ability to survive, resist, and have self-possession, right? You know, these are a lot of concepts that we're inheriting from the past movements. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. I want everybody to know that. So, for our younger panelists who are carrying forward these stories and legacies that were shaped by those who came before them, without direct context, you know, we are left to interpret and adapt to these narratives to fit in today's landscape. But I want to ask you, what are some of your challenges and opportunities of inheriting these histories? And how can we build a collective future that honors the past while making space for new interpretations of liberation? I know that was deep. Y'all can, you know. So again, I'll read it again. Our younger panelists carry forward stories and legacies that were shaped by those who came before them. What are some of the challenges and opportunities of inheriting these histories? And again, how can we build a new collective future that honors that past while making space for new interpretations and articulations? Also, let's give it up for Nneka. This is her first panel ever.
Come on, Nneka, you got it. Go first, Nneka.
She trying out the public speaking thing, y'all, so let's give it up.
You gotta do it. Go ahead.
I mean, this is kind of a thought that I'm still like cooking, so forgive me if it sounds a bit clunky. But I feel like from now, we're thinking from past, present day, and thinking back to the past, I feel like we've also expanded our idea of like what a lesbian is. And particularly when it comes to, and I think the reason why we've done that is because we've expanded our understanding of either what a woman or science or someone who, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this properly. Oh, okay. So, because we figured out how to expand our definition of like what a woman is. And I feel like, at least with some of the research I've done in the past, and then also some from things I've observed from back in the day, I mean like 2007, 2008, I feel like some of our challenges,
That's a long time ago.
I mean, if you,
That was a whole different world.
it really was. But, and I feel like from back then till now, like I think our understanding of gender identity, particularly when it comes to trans women, I think has expanded so much. And that I feel like, at least back in the day, that wasn't a thing. And I feel like it's made our movement so much richer. And particularly, like you mentioned like the word lesbian, like you feel it's disappearing. I feel like now we kind of understand more like the multifacets of lesbian instead of what we may have originally had thought of. And I guess it even goes back to like, even as we're like working to like center ourselves, there's a part of us that probably had thought like lesbianism is inherently white, middle class, and cis. Now, as we are expanding in our movement, we're starting to understand that. And it's not necessarily that. And I feel, huh? Never.
It was never that in my day. It was not that in my day. Lesbian was very, very broad, and it included trans lesbians in my day.
But you know, we the Ellen DeGeneres, I'm gay.
Exactly. Exactly. Or maybe that was my aversion, or more like, oh shit, is this really what I am because of that idea? And now, at least now, as I'm shedding that and understanding that, I feel like that's something from the past that I don't want to ever see again.
No, and I definitely resonate. And again, I always tell the story, met Lenn Keller when I was 21, right? So I'm coming from Prop 8, the L word. I'm thinking I'm Tegan and Sarah. I had the side bang, side swoop. I thought I was a white middle class lesbian, right? Because of the politics of representation, right? So we foregrounded this conversation to say a lot of that history has been suppressed, deleted, erased. Why? Because it was liberatory and inclusive in nature. And then they sold us and assimilated, corporatized, watered down, living in West Hollywood. I don't know no lesbians in West Hollywood, but living in West Hollywood. L word Disneyland figure. And you know, again, that's why I wanted to ask this question for the younger folk, right? Is what are the challenges and opportunities trying to interpret the past while understanding there's so much new?
You want to keep going?
Maybe I'll
Jump back in later. Yeah. I jotted down a thought process, and we're going to see if it can be reconstructed, so bear with me. Y'all talking about space, I think, is so important. Ruth Wilson Gilmore says freedom is a place, right? Like it's something we build, it's something we can go to, it's something that we can visit potentially, even if the rest of our lives are not free. But as you were saying, like gentrification and just all of the ills of late capitalism are really foreclosing our opportunities to create spaces of freedom. And I think that that is one of the primary issues that we have right now, and why BALA and any like queer space that is genuinely liberatory and inclusionary is so magnificent, because our opportunities to access that are very limited. And before this, we were talking about gay bars in Oakland and how this is like the gay renaissance of Oakland. Like there's so many gay bars, but where are the lesbian bars? There's so many gay bars, but where are the dykes supposed to go? Like I love me the gay bars, I go to the gay bars, but fundamentally it's not, that's a place where I feel like a visitor, you know, and a fairly welcome visitor, but still a visitor. And so I think that carving out these spaces for dykes is so, so important. Also, I kind of forgot to properly introduce myself. My name's Alecia, I use they, them pronouns. I'm an activist, an artist, and a dyke, and that's why I'm qualified to be here primarily. Because of the dyke part, because I'm a dyke.
You gotta list your qualifications.
And a Capricorn. And let's see, something when I was in high school and I was talking to an old gay teacher, and he introduced me to the concept of horizontal and vertical identities. For those who aren't familiar, a vertical identity is something like race or nationality that's passed on to you by a parent, and so you kind of take up the knowledge and characteristics that your parents give to you. But queerness is a horizontal identity in that you can be born into a queer life with absolutely no queer people around you. And that's why it's so important for us to have mentors and to have spaces where we're passing down this knowledge. But I recently started thinking about vertical identities again, and I thought about how race may be a vertical identity, but revolutionary struggle and revolutionary politics is never guaranteed to be vertically passed down to you. So you can be Black, you can be whatever, you can be any identity, but there's no guarantee that that politic is passed down to you. And so even if you are Black, even if you are a woman, even if it's all of these things that you see reflected in your parents, you still have to fight to find the revolutionary lineages through which we build these places and moments of freedom. And then I just want to close with a Fred Moten quote that I am butchering, so I'm so sorry to anyone who's familiar with this quote, but I'm going to do my best. I meant to write it down and I did not. But he says something along the lines of, what we're trying to get to is how we are when we get together to try to figure it out. That's right. That'll work. And so I think it's pretty good. It was pretty good. What we're trying to get to is how we are when we get together to figure it out. And so I think like when we're at BALA, when we're building these panels, when we're carving out spaces for us to experience moments of freedom, us making that effort is where we're trying to get to. as we figure it out, we are very briefly finding ourselves where we want and need to be.
My mask is tangled in my earring. Femme problems, the mask. The mask is tangled in my earrings. I think I'll just leave it there for now. Okay, so to discuss the question, like, I just feel like to comment on the definition or the expansiveness of lesbian, I want to bring it all the way back to Anna Julia Cooper, who was a liberated slave of Dutch origin in New England, and she made a speech that is often mistranslated as, you know, the ANI woman speech. She didn't grow up in the South, right, of the U.S., so she didn't have Anna Julia Cooper. Yeah, it's a speech. The speech about. Oh yes, I hear what you're saying. Yes, I'm intersecting two things. ANI woman is the Sojourner Truth, and also Anna Julia Cooper with the loopholes of retreat and Harriet Jacobson loophole of retreat. We're connecting Sojourner Truth and the ANI woman speech, and her legacy. It never said ANI woman, not once, because she had a Dutch dialect of English. So just so y'all know, that's where that came from. But I transliterated Anna Julia Cooper onto her name. Nonetheless, we're talking about Sojourner Truth. Let's run it back to Sojourner Truth, right? And she had the ANI woman speech often mistranslated. She didn't say ANI woman, but the point of that speech was to say that black women already exceeded a category of womanhood, right? This category of womanhood that was defined by whiteness, that to be black and to be a woman was to already be more than woman and more than black in the understandings of those definitions in life. And so to be a black lesbian or to be a black queer person or to be a black queer woman is already defying the gender that is embedded, I think, inside the term lesbian. And I think that's where, like, a lot of black folks might have discrepancies on what word we might want to use in a space that is welcoming for all. But I think at the root of it, for me, to be a black woman is already to exceed being a woman. And so to be a black anything, really, is to exceed the category. And that is the blessing of blackness, is to be uncapturable, to be ungovernable, to be unlabelable, to always exceed the category. So forgive my misnaming in the beginning there of the origins of that speech, but I did have a point there, and the point was that the label, whatever it is, we will always define it for ourselves and expand upon it. And then how the question was the challenges, right, of inheriting a legacy of third world lesbianism. I think there is two ways to look at that challenge. There's two dichotomies. There's the one where you could look at things with very rose-colored glasses and think of all the things that the people before us did and all the ways in which we are, just the shortcomings of that, or how we can't do that, right? The struggle of late capitalism, the difficulty of, like, identifying space exclusively and paying rent in a world where there's just, like, increasing exploitation at unfathomable paces that we just really can't keep up with. And then there's, the other side where we can really, like, critique our elders and really be hard and harsh on how things were different then and we don't feel the same way now. I think because I'm an educator, like, although I'm on the younger spectrum of the ages, I also work with people that are younger than me so often that I feel like this middle ground. And yeah, there's just a lot of space for me to accept and see what works, to take the rose-colored glasses off just a little bit and be able to critique, maybe think about how rest is more important to us now because how extensively exploitative capitalism is. And maybe that wasn't as important, it wasn't something that was named as something we need to do back in the day, but we're all disabled now, right? Like, there's such a spectrum of disability. Like, COVID has done so much to us, and we're so much more in tune and embodied that it helps to honor rest, even if we might feel like our legacies didn't want to do that. And when I think about, I didn't mean to get into this rest thing, that's kind of just how I showed up, but now that I'm thinking about rest, you know, I think often like, yes, my ancestors walked like long journeys. They carried heavy loads. They did a lot, and they really worked hard to receive that little bit of pleasure that they were able to access. And now that I receive pleasure and I have access, you know, there is a lot more opportunity for me to honor that labor that they did. And my feet don't have to bleed so that I can rest, right? I don't have to walk the miles barefoot. You know, I might be able to take them miles a little bit slower and have my friend with me along the way and take water breaks and enjoy the moon. And then I'm still gonna get to my destination, and my feet aren't gonna be bleeding, and I'm gonna be rested. And there's still freedom on that side, right? So, I mean, I'll just say that.
That was deep. That had me a little pause a little bit.
We went on a journey.
Okay, oh shit. No, I was kidding.
Took y'all on a walk in the desert.
Girl, you took me on something. All right, so because that brings up a quote that Lenn used to tell me a lot, and she said the debt has been paid. The debt has been paid. The debt, D-E-B-T, the debt has been paid. And you know, she constantly reminded me of you know, the master's tools won't dismantle the master's house. You know, these be like them little biblical sayings, but the black lesbian feminist version. And these are the things, the mantras, right? And she told me about women she was coming up with who died early 40s of cancer. She told me stories about being Pat Parker's bartender, right? She told me about the weathering that many women of that time period was going for. She warned me about, because I was getting my PhD at the time. She's like, don't invest too much, right? Because the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So these were really learnings from a previous generation about everything that they were really pushing to advance, but at what cost? And really giving the question back to me and my generation of who pays the price. And so that's something that I really get, and I think that goes back to Alecia's point around lineage, revolutionary lineage. All right, this ain't no Tegan and Sarah soundtrack. This is a pretty particular consciousness and a particular, you thought that was funny, but it's a particular framing and it's a particular consciousness that, again, the Bay Area Lesbian Archive is really dedicated to preserving, which is one about acknowledging why these things are being erased, right? To have a message around get rest, a message around the debt has been paid. You know, the systems and the powers that be don't want those type of messages circulating around in the popular consciousness, right? So again, I thought this was a really great response from our youngsters. Give it up for them, y'all. Now, OGs, I saw y'all squirming in y'all seat. Do y'all want to have a response to what the young G said? Y'all want to respond? You can respond. It's a safe space. It's an intergenerational dialogue. Can you get her to? Oh.
Yeah, I wanted to just thank you for, you know, what you said about lesbian and the definition of lesbian. And I wanted to just say that, you know, back in the day, we didn't have popular culture like Ellen DeGeneres and all these like white lesbians who took over the representation of lesbian. And so the way that it was happening among lesbians of color and on the ground was that lesbian was a very broad term. And I can tell you that in didactics, we had, like I always identified as non-binary. I identify as andro. In the day we used to call ourselves androgynous because that was a term. And then it became non-binary, and I still identify as non-binary. And in my collective, we are still friends. This is a really wonderful thing about lesbian friendships. We are still friends. This was in the 70s, and we're still friends. And we have a little Facebook group, and we talk every day, and we have political arguments, and then, we make up, and we do all kinds of stuff together online because people are in different places. But in the, in the collective, we have non-binary people. We have at least one trans person, lesbian. We have, a whole array of things going on. And all of that, again, has been erased we're the dominant representation of white lesbians as, whatever Ellen DeGeneres and all the rest of them are. So I wanted to thank you for bringing that up because it's very important, and I think that there are more things in common than we generally think. So, that's like one continuity that we do have. There are things that are discontinuous too, but that's not one of them.
All right, getting me into my next question. So again, the broader intention of this panel is to explore the idea of lesbianism, not merely as an identity, but as a political reclamation, okay? A reclaiming of autonomy and self-possession against systems that have historically pathologized and marginalized queer communities. How can we cultivate a third world consciousness today that centers this vision of lesbianism in our continued fight for justice? So again, the intention of this panel, again, is it's a lot to unpack, but the broader goal is to explore the idea of lesbianism, not merely as an identity, but as a political reclamation, a reclaiming of autonomy and self-possession against systems that have historically pathologized and marginalized queer communities. Again, how can we cultivate today a third world consciousness that centers this vision of lesbianism in our continued fight for justice?
I can start this one. So I just think I keep thinking about y'all talking about Ellen DeGeneres and like the lesbians, right? And I'm from Sudan, right? So I'm like, who is that? I know who she is. And yet, like, when I think about the, like, people who gave me ideas of alternative womanhood in Sudan in my research, like, my mind goes to Aisha Al-Falatia and Hawa Tagtaga. And they were both, like, Sudanese musicians who pioneered, like, a sort of woman-first stance, right? Like, they were organizing on the national front for freedom, and they were like, I don't like these men, and they formed their own groups, and they went and just made women-only groups. I mean, it wasn't a dyke group or a lesbian group per se, right? But it's a women's organizing group where the women are meeting together and speaking to their issues outside of the patriarchal gaze. And so we can set the record straight, I believe Bell Hooks' phrase was a cis, white, hetero, patriarchal, capitalist society. And that's what it is that we're working against, right? And so what I was saying before when I was talking about queerness in a non-romantic way, I just think about what it means to remove patriarchy and heteronormativity from the equation, right? And to just be in spaces where we're just there to be with each other and fight for freedom regardless of what is being offered on the table, romantically, so to speak. And I think, Aisha Al-Falatia, she had a way for grounding her politics in women's music by taking national stages wearing like the Sudanese flag as her tobe, right? So in Sudan, women's music has been like a really historically persecuted genre of performance, because how dare women be free and express their opinion, right? Especially if that opinion does not align with the cis, white, heteropatriarchal capitalist society. If women are maybe like critiquing marriage or critiquing the patriarchy or critiquing, masculine military powers, then we don't want to hear about them. And we really want to make sure we're policing those women, their words, their actions, their presentation. And so women's music was wildly popular, super accessible, and then women musicians couldn't get a national stage. Men were covering their hit songs because they just didn't want to record the women. Men were on stage performing these songs to audiences because they didn't want to have women on stage dancing. And so they had to, kind of transform their performance on stage to enact this rebellion while still maintaining order in some way, right? They were being ungovernable in their own way. And so Aisha Falaitia used to always like go and perform on stages wearing the Sudanese liberation flag on her tob. So she would wear the tob because they required her to, right? Because married women or women of a certain age had to be covered in a certain way, and she didn't want to abide by that. But she would wear it anyways and just kind of wear the flag. And now I think about the young women who wear all white tobes, and it's this energy of the kandaka. The kandaka is the freedom fighter, the woman who is also a queen who leads the men, you know, in the front lines of the marches to freedom. And so the Sudanese liberation flag now, you know, gets also translated as a white flag sometimes. And Hawat Taktaga also did very similar things, often did like political speeches on stage. And yeah, those are the people that I think about. I don't know if that answered your question, but that was what I wanted to talk about, so that's it.
No, but I learned a lot. That's fucking dope. Okay. But it does answer the question. I'll say more, but anybody else want to respond? You sure? You scared? You got it? Well, let the people know what you be going through. What motivates you to organize?
What motivates me to organize?
Mm-hmm.
I think what motivates me particularly to organize is not only like affirming, again, in my humanity, but also the fact of, like, when I came out as queer, I came out like 3.5 years ago, so pretty early. And and when I came out, it's made me slowly realize that not only am I about to change my entire life, but I'm about to change like my entire mindset, because lesbianism and queerness is inherently a political act. And a big part of it is because I'm no longer emotionally or sexually available to the larger demographic, even though the larger demographic is still obsessed with us as people for the purposes of like oppression. And coming from the third world, I presume, like the process of me like having to accept that, but also but continuously like unlearning like what it meant for me, like the path I was supposed to be on. And I guess the reason why I organize is because honestly, I want to be around people who are going through the same things and want the same type of liberation, and they want to get away from that toxic consciousness that women are essentially shaped to be, and in terms of like finding and fighting for liberation. And when it comes to, I guess, the process of like decolonizing, because I guess that's what it is, I find that organizing has not only affirmed that I'm not crazy, but it's also given me a larger community that has a common goal. And our common goal is finding our liberation. So. Oh, the Black LGBT Migrant Project.
Okay, let's give it up, y'all.
This is kind of riffing off what was said about like, ain't I a woman, and Black womanhood inherently being something, Blackness and womanhood equaling more than the sum of their parts, I guess is a way to say it. Makes me think about Horton Spillers, who is an incredibly smart and incredibly confusing writer in the field of Black studies. So smart, so incredible. I have to read everything like 5 times. But in an American grammar book, she says that in order to speak a true word of myself, I must strip down through layers of attenuated meaning made in excess over time. And I think when she's saying this, it means that like for a Black woman to find yourself, you have to excavate so many images and stereotypes and caricatures that are projected onto you. And only after you are able to excavate through all of that can you actually figure out who you are outside of the context of all of this misogynoir that confines and constrains our existence. And I think that once you are able to do that, or as you are able to do that, choosing labels becomes such a liberating and beautiful thing, to have choice and agency and be able to be like, yeah, I'm a fucking dyke, dude. Like, I'm a raging dyke. I'm a raging lesbian. I'm non-binary. I'm genderqueer. Like, whatever words make you happy, it's so much more powerful when you've had to do all of that excavation to get to that point. And I think that sometimes labels and like labeling in my generation gets like sticky or feels kind of trivial or feels petty. I feel like there's a lot of like queer infighting and just like bottomless discourse about labels and names and pronouns and all of this stuff. And I think that when we're able to use these labels as a way to build affirming and effective community, and we use these labels as a way to like define ourselves against the white, cis, heteropatriarchal capitalist state, and when the labels take action, because like you said, like queerness is political, inherently political, if you are really living in that identity. And I think it's very possible to be gay and live an apolitical life. Like, I think that's very possible, but if you're really understanding the roots of the terms that you're using, you are identifying yourself with a politic. And I also think that we are now heading into a time when it's going to be less and less possible for people to live homonormative, homo-nationalist lives. I think it's about to get fucking dicey. And I think those of us who have not homonormative, homo-nationalist, kind of like the Ellen DeGeneres thing, like being like, you're gay, but you own a house and you're middle class and you're just a normal guy who happens to love men, but I'm just a normal guy, instead of like, I'm a freaky queerdo. And I think that it's very possible that we are going to be reaching a point where that type of life is not going to be achievable for a lot of people. And so for those of us who have already been cultivating queerness as an affirmative and agitative politic and label, we need to be ready when all of these people are like, we need to be ready to bring into the fold all of the people who've been trying to not be political in their queerness, because soon I think that's not really going to be an option anymore.
Queer as in start a riot. Queer as in start a riot. Queer as in be
Queer as in
ungovernable.
start a riot, okay?
Be ungovernable.
Revolutionary lineages. You see what type of queers we are, okay? We these type of dykes, okay? We ain't no Ellen DeGeneres dyke, okay?
Kerby, do you need to start a comedy show? I feel like you have a punchline with the Ellen DeGeneres. We need a part 2 of this panel in which it is the comedy show with Kerby.
Oh,
The Black Lesbian Comedy
and queers
Show.
in general, we're hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
Laugh to keep from crying. But what you gotta say, Dr. Wellman?
I'm having a moment right
You having a moment? What's your sign again?
now. Oh, it's okay, y'all. It's not
No,
that
she
kind
got
of
it. What's your
moment.
sign again? I know
But
your
you know, I'm
sign.
always very much.
In the vibe.
Okay, so check this out. I'm a jazz musician. And for so many years, you know, when you go to these jazz clubs, or even as a jazz educator, you know, jazz is black music. But then when we go to play the music or go to teach the music, there's hardly any black people in the room. And that's how I feel right now. It's like, where the black lesbians at? I'm not quite sure what that's about, you know, but I'm sitting here thinking about my own identity as a black lesbian. And I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, you know, Kansas City, Missouri. And it was just it was very difficult to be, you know, be inside of my developing kind of understanding and sexuality, right? And I am just looking around this room and wondering trying to find myself being reflected. We're up here on, okay, where y'all at? Stand up, let me see you. See what I'm saying? Yeah, look, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about. So that's a very interesting kind of like position to be in when I've chosen to be, like my organization is Black on Purpose. And, you know, it is grounded in Blackness, you know. And when I say that I'm doing wake work, I really am. It's like being in Blackness in the wake, right? As we talk about this, and it's about creating space where, you know, we can thrive and flourish. And so inside of this conversation, I'm also thinking about this word lesbian, how it's not okay to be lesbian. I mean, we're kind of back at that place. We were having a conversation about that. So, you know, among like the young people, and I was talking with a friend once, and she was saying that some of the young people that are around her are talking with her in confidence because they feel like they're in the closet as lesbians, that they have to be, you know, non-binary, or they can be anything but lesbian. And that takes me back to misogyny, right? There's this misogynistic undertone to being a lesbian, like in the challenges and the problems with that, right? And so then therefore it makes it even more political to say, I'm a goddamn lesbian, you know, I'm a lesbian, you know, and deal with it, you know. I don't know, these are just some things that are running through my mind right now. It'd be nice to hear some other folks respond to some of the things that I'm saying on this, up here on this panel or out there.
You can be lesbian and non-binary, because I identify strongly as lesbian, queer, non-binary, and many other things, because I lived in a bunch of different other places when I was in exile, and there are many other terms, you know, besides lesbian, and there are places like, for example, I lived for 6 years in India, and at that time the term lesbian was rejected in favor of terms in Indian languages. So, you know, I think beyond, I mean, I think it's important, you know, the idea of lesbian, but I'm not fixated on the term. Like, I really like the term dyke a lot. Sorry about that, but that's just my term. You know, we are all dykes. I still identify as a dyke. And, you know, I often walk into the classroom and say, well, you know, because I teach LGBT studies, and hello, you know, I'm Dr. Bacchetta and I'm a dyke. And, you know, Kerby knows that. But, you know, I think that it depends, however, whatever the term is, it's less important than what we put behind it. And there are multiple ways to self-designate, but I agree with you that, you know, it's all about in your face kind of, you know, like I'm not like a nice lesbian who's going to go and sit in front of my TV and knit or something. I mean, I don't have anything against TV or knitting, but I'm just like, you know, that's just, I've been an activist all my life, so anyway.
And so, yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
But we have BALA, Bay Area Lesbian Archive, and that's going to be in the future. It's going to be forever. And so what is that going to mean? What does the lesbian mean? I guess we're back to that again, right? And so it has, you know, the you know, what does it mean, right? So that's part of the conversation for the future, for the present.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. What is a lesbian? What does it mean to be lesbian? Because we're all going to be dead and gone, and there's going to be BALA. You know, it's like, what is that? What's the Bay Area? What's a lesbian? Mommy, what's a lesbian? You know, so are we going to be erased? Is that term going to be erased? And so by the erasure, does it erase the experience? Does it erase, you know, those women who created this thing called Women Take Back the Night? That was taught, who remembers that? Women Take Back the Night, right? Yeah, and then what that was all about, right? Having those were lesbians and others. And others.
I don't think like, and maybe like, let's fast forward like 50 years. I feel like with the work and activism that we're doing now, it's particularly when it comes to like archiving and expressing, I do feel like, well, I don't feel like we'll ever have to worry about the term lesbian disappearing, because I feel like when you compare like lesbian to queer, I feel like lesbians is a very distinct experience, and that, of course, many, many people are going to continue to have. And when we're documenting particularly that particular experience, when, and if you define it as completely removing yourself from like cishet, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I guess like completely removing yourself out of like the whole cishet male web, whereas maybe other sexualities may have like little pieces in it. I don't think that that's going to, I think that we'd have to worry more about, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I think we'd have to worry more about like when we terms of like how we define lesbian, how we consume and construct all the identities that might make particular lesbians, particularly with Black lesbians. Less so than we'd have to worry about, less so what we worry about like lesbian, well, not lesbians disappearing, but more like having a record of lesbianism not be here, if I'm making sense. Yeah.
Let's give it up, Nneka, y'all. First panel. First motherfucking panel. All right, and you're doing great, because this is a very complex conversation, dialogue, that we don't get to have often. Yeah. We do not have spaces for ourselves to knowledge produce, to look up our history, and that's why, again, I say thank you to EastSide Arts Alliance for being a partner, taking a stand, and helping us fund this exhibit, okay? This is a very great partner, and we can't take it for granted. That's why I want y'all to keep supporting EastSide. I want you to keep supporting the Bay Area Lesbian Archive, all right? This is our first public programming since the passing of our founder, Lenn Keller, all right? Our last public event was 2019, when we celebrated 30 years of Ashe, a free Black lesbian newsletter. The root and the foundation of this archive and purpose and function and format is preserving the Black lesbian. And it's so funny, because I know Lynn would be laughing at me, because I remember she came to my first talk at Berkeley, and she was like, girl, you sure saying some big ass words. Because everything's about access. How are people coming into a conversation? Because it's a conversation everybody needs to be a part of, and so that's our dedication to this movement to reclaim lesbianism, right? We as an organization define lesbianism as a politics of survival, resistance, and self-possession. We archive and we collect the history of the everyday lesbian, not the Ellen DeGenereses of the world. JK. And why that's important, and why, again, we focus on preserving the legacy of the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, because them women were built different. Just saying. They built different. You ever met a 1970s lesbian? It was just something in the water, right? But you gotta understand the context in which they're coming out of. McCarthyism, Jim Crow South, relocating from the South to urban centers. This is a story of Lenn Keller growing up in Chicago, being the first person to integrate the suburbs of Evanston, Illinois. So them women were built completely different. These are women who were coming out of an era of incarceration for queer people. Y'all know about Ma Rainey, Mabel Hampton, the blues women, Black women being literally incarcerated for being lesbians. When I think of lesbian, I think of eugenics. I think of the sexology movement. I think of the Kinsey scale. I don't like calling myself a lesbian. And I say this thing about transgenderism as a term. The same man who said transgender and autonomy is also the same man who said Black people are the lowest race in the earth. So all of these terms we should never really be too attached to, but we should always disidentify from them, decolonize our relationship to them, but again, still acknowledge the shoulders that we stand on. The women of the 70s, 80s, and 90s are built completely fucking different. And it's on this wall. And for this generation, we have to put respect on their name, their legacy, and what they contributed to. But not rest upon it, right? Because Lenn Keller also told me these women weren't perfect though. She used to tell me all about Audre. She was like, she wasn't doing nothing but writing down everything we were saying in the group circle. And I was like, no, wait. She was like, she ain't had no original thought. And it's like, this. But Audre it's like a god. But it's the everyday lesbian she was getting her game from, right? And preserving it and documenting. You think she really came up to Master Tools, went to dismantle the master's house? That was probably a very sick and tired black woman who came up with that, and Audre. But that is, but that's the work, y'all. That's the work of archiving. That's the work of community relations. That's the work of being a witness to each other, right? And keep showing up for these events, right? The 3 youngsters I invited to this panel, these are our contemporaries. They lead in real movements here in the Bay Area. I want y'all to support them, right? And our OGs, I want you to hold them very high. Dr. Paola has been holding it down for Dykes at UC Berkeley. I really was not going to get no PhD from UC Berkeley until Paola took a stand for me and supported my lesbian research. Wow. They didn't want that. So this woman took a stand for me to move forward, and that's lesbian, right? That's what I want y'all to take away from all of this, okay? It ain't this. It's this, all right? And so that's the primary function. That's the primary function of why we're here today. Again, all right. Everybody say thank you, Aubrey, because they're gonna allow us to stay here 10 more minutes. Say thanks. We in their house. Thanks, Roberto. So before we wrap up the conversation, I do want to make sure we get some reflections from the audience in case you have questions or comments or affirmations or even responses to Dr. Wellman's points. All right, so put them up. Who got something to say? I got you. Who brave? Y'all scared, huh? Okay. Okay, you got one in the back for sure. We got 2. Cool. Going once. Going twice. All right, so I'm going to get these 2 comments and these 2 questions. Can you hand me that microphone, Shah?
This one? It's connected too.
All right. What you guys say?
So I'm not exactly sure how to frame this as a question, but it's something that this conversation has brought up that I've been thinking about for a couple of years now, a lot. Coming from Latin America, and we're talking about, third world feminisms, third world queer liberation movements. Right now in Latin America, increasingly over the last couple of decades, but really, really right now, the feminist and a lot of the lesbian movement in Latin America is aggressively transphobic. And that's not like at the margins, it's the dominant movement. And this conversation, going back to Ellen DeGeneres, and how these legacies of feminisms that we were taught and that were put onto us erased so much of the work of our elders and our ancestors and the struggles of our ancestors. That has happened on an international scale too, right? It's not just across time. It's happened so that the feminisms, the queer politics that in Africa, I know more about what's happening in Latin America because I've looked into that more, I've studied that more, has been, Ellen DeGeneresified, right? And that is troubling because we're talking about, this third world politics and, being internationalist, like being in solidarity. I know that at least one person on this stage has put their freedom at stake for international struggle. Yeah. I guess, what do we do with that? Chicken's coming home to roost, as our brother said, right? The reality is that just because things are coming from a third world context, we've built up this legacy, this poison because we have not effectively transmitted these things across generations, but also into international struggle, because the left over the 50-year counter-revolution, as Pascal Robert often says, has destroyed this link from the OGs to the young Gs, but also to any kind of international liberatory politics. And we're rebuilding it right now, I think, finally. But how do we deal with that? Because that conversation is not happening. And it's scary. It's frightening. I'm not even really sure how to put that question. I'm so sorry.
I appreciate it, though. Let's give it up. All right, all right. And then I'm going to come to the sister over here.
I think we're going to hear both questions. Do we have another?
So I have a really long and complicated history with the word lesbian because I came out late. I'm 58 now. Came out in my late 30s, and I have 2 children, 2 grandsons, and so I had male relationships. And then when I came out as lesbian, I was lesbian, right? And I was doing all political stuff, and then got my feelings hurt, and stuff, because people where we go. And then, like, fluidity happened. And so I don't, like, I identify with lesbian politics. I am more like, I guess, bisexual. And I came out as bisexual, and I actually felt shame in that because of the climate, like, wants you to be one or the other. And so, but I had to, like, come to terms with that. And then, but as, to me, what your original question about lesbianism as a political statement, is that reclamation. I like that because for me, what the things that I had learned, and I'm not sure of there's a connection, but I think the connection between the comedy River Collective back in the 70s, right? And the women who made that statement. And I'm a midwife. I'm a Black midwife. And I serve Black people, Black birthing people, trans, lesbian, whoever, right? And I'm intentional about that. And I am in the movement as a reproductive justice advocate, right? And what I know about reproductive justice is that Black lesbian women came up with that. That's a Black lesbian women. Reproductive justice is a Black woman's lesbian term that was coined in the 90s. And get, you know, your foundation, right? So like, so anyway, that's how I feel about the word lesbian and reclaiming it, and not really, like I never was I like the word lesbian. Queer used to be a bad word. It's good. I like it. But
Yeah.
my identity was lesbian, and I was really, really proud of that when I thought that's all that I was. But I'm so much more than that, you know. And I'm everything. But that's how I feel about it.
Can we respond or no? Are we at time? Can we respond?
Right. Let's give it up, y'all. Thank you for the 2 comments because, again, bravery. That's what lesbianism is all about. Who else is having these conversations? The good, the bad, the ugly, the uncomfortable. That's what lesbian politics and spaces and consciousness births and provides. That's the whole point of this exhibit. The conversations, the concepts, the things that these women were experimenting with. Again, take note of them on this wall. Take note of it in the gallery. We have 1 more month left in this gallery. Please spread the word, because this is a portal. This is a reminding, right? And both comments that came up are messy, hella messy. You know lesbians hella mean. No, I'm just kidding. But there's also a strong sense of tribalism. Right, when we're talking about a third world consciousness, we gotta defend ours. We gotta, you know, about that term set tripping. We tripping on our set, the set of lesbianism, right? And so it's complicated. That's all I'm here to say, and I just appreciate y'all being able to hold the complexity of it all, right? And so I'm gonna allow the panel to close us out and respond and just give some parting words to the audience, because they was listening to every word y'all said, y'all. Y'all was, right? Because we need more spaces and more opportunities to learn, be in dialogue from each other, and have our brain shift. Did y'all feel y'all, what's that called, amygdala? Changing in your brain, right? So that's what this is all about, providing spaces for growth, elevation, and consciousness raising. So close us out, Ms. Shah, or Person Shah.
You can call me Professor Shah. That's what my students call me. You know what I'm saying? Okay. I'm not a doctor yet, but Professor Shah does exist. Yeah, no, I really appreciate both those comments, and I think they kind of loop into something that I was thinking about to close us off. You know, when I started the panel, I mentioned that like Black women, to be Black and to be a woman in tandem really already exceeds the definition of both. And if we really like just go back to the core of Black feminist theory, Black lesbian theory, Black queer theory, across continents, it's really about the excess, about exceeding the definition and the desire for the white supremacist, colonialist, capitalist, cis heteropatriarchal entity to attempt to contain us, right, in these definitions. And so as long as we remember that, you know, we exceed any category that might already pre-exist, and that we define those things, we cultivate those definitions in our actions every day. And when I said, you know, queer isn't start a riot, queer isn't be ungovernable, I really meant that in the sense that you cannot contain the revolutionary spirit of Blackness and queerness, regardless of where it exists. And just to speak to both of those things, I think, both comments that were made, I think, you know, we exceed the definitions of lesbian inherently already, and that there is no container for that. And that, you know, if a liberation movement is to claim freedom for women or for lesbians, you know, it would need to be freedom for all people too, including trans women, trans folks who might not identify as on either side of the binary, right? Like all of them. If the liberation is not already included, like if you went back and asked Sojourner Truth, I don't think she would put a litmus test as to who is a woman, you know, whether a trans woman could really be a woman. I think Sojourner Truth would be like, hell yeah, bitch, your freedom is my freedom. I really think she would be about that shit. And so that's where I'm at when it comes to that. And there was a question that was, you know, listed in as a something for us as panelists to think about how we could cultivate a third world consciousness, right? That really is like envisioning new definitions of lesbianism and justice. And I think the most important thing for us to do is to remember that the United States is not the center of everything, right? And that is the point of third world liberalism, that we really need to make sure that we are informing ourselves about the
the activism of other folks across the world, and not everyone uses the term lesbianism, and I think it really matters a lot in the continent of Africa. So if you're really interested in African women's forms of liberation, you might not find the word lesbian when you're looking. So just to be expansive and decenter the US in any kind of like liberation study that you want to do, to really think about what it means to create a network of care, which Audre Lorde would have called an ethics of care, and lots of other Black lesbians called love, right? Bell Hooks called it love. And so we really need to just think about what love means for us and what it means to love one another outside of romance. I really think that's the most important thing. We might not be able to love each other like that, but we gotta love each other like that. You know what I mean? Like your friendships, your family, those chosen connections, they matter already to you. You've already decided that, right? That's why you brought those people into your life. And now it's about creating and activating those networks of care in a long form. That means I'm not gonna walk away from my friend, just like I'm not gonna walk away from my partner, just not I'm not gonna walk away from my chosen family, like I'm not gonna walk away from my neighbor. Okay, my neighbor matters. So yeah, decenter the US, networks of care, everyone's a lesbian, and the end.
I think about the life I live, a figure made of clay, and think about the things I've lost, the things I gave away. And when I'm in a certain mood, I search the halls and look. One night I found these magic words in a magic book. Throw it away, throw it away. Give your love, live your life each and every day, and keep your hands wide open. Let the sun shine through, 'cause you can never lose a thing if it belongs to you.
Let's just end there. That was too beautiful to
Yeah, that was a
any
lot.
words after. I don't know. Maybe you want to say something.
Maybe something really quick.
Okay.
No, take.
But for me, that okay.
No, that was it. Let's give it up for Dr. Wellman. Show of hands, who was shifted? Okay, okay. So, thank you.
That was Abby Lincoln, who many said was a lesbian. Might as well.
Well, don't be scared. Who wanna say something? Well, we're finishing up. We're at the end, so that's good.
I love how you mentioned decentering the United States in terms of not only I guess in terms of judging people in terms of where they are in their development of queer consciousness and decolonization, particularly when it comes to Black queer immigrants, and that's what's in my thought process right now. How you mentioned the word lesbian may not necessarily strike bells, or even the word Black might not be able to strike bells just yet, even though they are Black people. And when we have conversations like this, and when we're thinking about in terms of how we develop a third world collective consciousness, I think giving grace towards people when it comes to, I guess, not only unlearning how colonialism kind of messed up our brains when it comes to accepting and loving who we are, but also furthermore, not coming into, not when a new Black person comes into this country and they're queer and they've probably fled horrible things, having a community that embraces them, that's not only just theirs, but also part of a larger collective. A part of the larger gay collective. That makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you.